Fox News alert. Former Obama administration Attorney General Loretta Lynch testifying behind closed doors in Capitol Hill, appearing before a joint House panel who's investigating the DOJ's handling of the Hillary Clinton email probe and Trump-Russia investigation. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today, of course, is Harris Faulkner, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, host of Kennedy on the Fox Business Network, Kennedy herself, and joining us on the couch, my favorite guy, David Asman, host of Bulls and Bears on the Fox Business Network, weeknights at 5 p.m. Eastern. Hello, my friend.
Hello,
How
my
are
friend.
you?
I'm great. What a terrific group. Thank you for inviting me.
We have a lot to get
Happy
to.
holidays.
Yeah.
Happy holidays to you, too.
Yeah,
Merry
thank
Christmas.
you very much.
All right. Former top cop Loretta Lynch arriving on Capitol Hill this morning, speaking to the House Judiciary Committee and Oversight Committees behind closed doors. House Republicans looking to complete their work as Democrats prepare to take the House majority next month. Top Democrats have vowed to shut these investigations down. A big focus of today's questioning is expected to be Loretta Lynch's infamous tarmac meeting with former President Bill Clinton. That meeting went down at a Phoenix airport in 2016 in the midst of the DOJ's Hillary Clinton email investigation. Just 2 days ago, former FBI Director James Comey testified. Comey also served during the Obama administration, and then Attorney General Loretta Lynch was, of course, his boss. He has called that tarmac meeting inappropriate, and he repeated that to lawmakers. Peter Ducey is live on Capitol Hill with the latest. Peter.
Melissa, Loretta Lynch did not stop to talk on her way in here, and we can't go in there. So what we're doing now is just listening to lawmakers as they come out to take short breaks. I don't want to talk right over this gaggle down there. But from lawmakers who have come out of the hearing, we're told that Lynch is being forthcoming with lawmakers who have questions about why the Obama DOJ investigated the Trump campaign and not the Clinton campaign.
I have now attended the vast majority of these 17 or 18 interviews. It's the same questions over and over again. The interesting aspect of this is that I think that Loretta Lynch is willing to answer all the questions. She hasn't been interrupted even once by any of her attorneys, and there are a lot of attorneys in there. And so I think it's been a free exchange of questions and answers.
Republicans have hinted that they've got detailed questions about the infamous tarmac meeting where Lynch and Bill Clinton huddled in the cabin of a private jet in Arizona while her Justice Department weighed charges against his wife, candidate Clinton. Lynch has insisted it was just too hot to talk outside, but they kept the chat to the topics of grandchildren and news of the day, which was that day Brexit. But Republicans are also curious about why former FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page would text that they knew Lynch would go easy on Hillary Clinton. And this is from the first batch of Comey's testimony 2 weeks ago. John Ratcliffe, the Republican, said the day before the interview, the Hillary Clinton interview on July 1st, Lisa Page texted Peter Strzok about Loretta Lynch and about her decision to follow your recommendation and said, quote, yeah, it's a real profile and courage since she, meaning Lynch, knows no charges will be brought. Do you recall reading that text anywhere or hearing about it? And Comey said, I don't remember. I read it. I think I've heard about it in the media. So we don't know how much longer these hallways are going to stay quiet, but it might be a while because lawmakers had more than 5 hours worth of questions for Comey earlier this week. Melissa.
Peter Ducey, thank you so much. Bring it out to the couch. David, what do you think is the value of going over this territory again?
Well, particularly in light of going over the deal with General Flynn and the way he was treated as opposed to the way Hillary Clinton was treated in kind of a similar circumstance in many ways is worthwhile. I think it's clear that while Hillary Clinton was given all kinds of leeway and perhaps even some dare we say it, obstruction of justice. There are suspicions of obstruction of justice from her husband, the former president, to Loretta Lynch. I think it's worthwhile raising all this. And frankly, it's something that's not going to be raised after January 2nd when the new Congress comes into power. So this is kind of the last dash of Republicans. By the way, I got to give her credit. Harris just brought up a terrific point. If they were just talking about grandchildren, I hope you don't mind me using your point. If they were just talking about grandchildren, why couldn't they have done it on the phone? I mean, why did they have to meet at a tarmac in the middle of nowhere? You know, I mean, it's kind of weird.
My point had to do with what taxpayers would want done on the person's time for whom we're paying. It was really just an observation.
It's a good one.
It's like, you know, are they having conversations that as taxpayers we would understand why they would need to get together, you know, and then later on in the midst of the fact that his wife was under investigation, so on and so forth.
I guess, but Katie, you know, what would we possibly learn that's new? Everybody is so dug into their position and what they think about everything that went on. I just don't know that it's worthwhile to spend time dragging someone back going over this.
I mean, we've heard from Loretta Lynch once, I believe, in front of congressional testimony. In terms of how this will actually get results, I am cynical that this will get anywhere. Republicans are out of power in the House. Democrats who are taking over the committees have made it very clear that they are shutting down all of the investigations into DOJ misconduct, into FBI misconduct. I would hope that a hearing like this with questions and answers from Loretta Lynch, I'm glad to hear that she's actually being forthcoming, unlike James Comey, who said he couldn't recall 300 plus times and his lawyers continued to interrupt him. I would hope that the end game here would be to treat everybody equally under the law, regardless of whether you're a Clinton or whether you're a Trump. But unfortunately, I think that sand has run out of the hourglass when it comes to how much Republicans can do, and I wish that they had been able to do a second hearing with her sooner.
I guess, Kennedy, address that point. I mean, do you feel like different people are treated differently under the law by the DOJ and the FBI, and does this get us closer to rectifying that?
I don't know that it gets us closer to rectifying anything. I don't think we've seen proof other than McCabe and Comey and Strzok and Page having been removed from duty at the FBI that things have really changed. And I don't know how Christopher Wray demonstrates that, but what I will say is Comey and Lynch seem to turn on each other. And if you remember, James Comey said in his public testimony that he knows stuff about Loretta Lynch that he can't disclose for a few years, and he was basically saying that he had something over her head. And, you know, he also characterized their discussions in a certain way that cast her in a very negative light. And so maybe this is a chance for her to defend herself and set the record straight. Part of the issue with that tarmac meeting was people didn't trust Hillary Clinton to begin with. They thought that she was shady and that she was making deals in opacity that benefited only herself. And if you remember, Loretta Lynch didn't disclose that meeting on the tarmac.
Got caught.
It was a local reporter in Arizona that did some footwork and, you know, recognized the tail numbers on the planes. Yeah, and then she said jokingly at one point, man, I wish that there was a lock on the inside and I hadn't let the president in. And if they were talking about innocuous things like golf and grandkids,
that has its own visual.
Yeah, why would she say something like that and express that kind of regret? Yeah. And James Comey is very dismissive with the questioning that he's gotten from these committees, but I have to say these are still very serious issues. So if the former Attorney General is taking them seriously and acknowledging that, I think that's a benefit for the country to get some of that on the record.
So since there were only, to our knowledge, since she didn't have a lock on the door, Loretta Lynch, since there were only two people who were having this conversation, are we also going to hear from Bill Clinton? I mean, if you want, as journalists, we know that if you want the whole story, you have to talk with many people, and you have to just listen.
Well, and
right? And so are they going to have Bill Clinton on and let him talk about this too? I don't know.
Or President Obama. I mean, President Obama.
Yeah, but he wasn't on the plane.
No, but remember he said that Hillary Clinton did not divulge any secrets.
He said that on 60 Minutes.
Anything that
right?
did any, yeah, I think he said it several times, as a matter of fact. But the point is that how would he know that if he wasn't getting information he wasn't supposed to get?
But I still don't want that hearsay even from a former president. I want the two people who were in the room.
The reason why Republicans
or the plane
have taken Loretta Lynch back into the public, well, not public, but back into Congress to testify about this is because of the timing of this issue and the way that the situation was handled. Just a week after they had this meeting, there was a huge conflict of interest with Hillary Clinton under criminal investigation during an election with, you know, FBI agents not questioning her and saying, you know, we're going to exonerate you before we even interview you and your inner circle. And then Bill Clinton walking onto this airplane and having this meeting. There were huge questions about whether she should recuse herself. She did not officially recuse herself. And yet there was all this outrage over Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein and now Matthew Whitaker and Democrats, you know, demanding that he recuse himself from that situation. And yet we had this massive conflict at that point in time.
I want to add something on to that. And I think it's really important because she said, I'm not going to recuse myself. I didn't do anything inappropriate. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept whatever recommendation the FBI makes. Now, when James Comey's recommendation was no charges, which isn't the responsibility of a law enforcement organization, when a police officer arrests you, they don't go before a judge and say, you know, what the punishment should be, and they don't list what the crimes are. A prosecutor does that, and that's Loretta Lynch's job, but she abdicated that and, you know, gave it to Comey. So it seems like he gave her cover, which is really weird, because he was the one who said, I don't recommend charges, and she said, oh, case closed.
But no matter who's talking, whether it's this or whether it's James Comey when he came out the other day and was addressing the cameras, everybody kind of comes to the same conclusion, although they blame different actors. They say that trust in the DOJ and the FBI has been totally eroded. Comey blames the president, other people blame him and Loretta Lynch. But nobody has a solution to how it's restored, David. How does it get restored?
Well, one thing that you got to do is expose it to sunlight, and that's why I'm for exposing all of these issues that have been covered in darkness with sunlight. And, I mean, what happens is, once you investigate closely, you find that Mr. McCabe did things wrong, that Peter Strzok did things wrong, and they end up leaving the agencies. You get rid of the bad eggs.
That's rare.
You know, Comey the other day said, I'm proud of what the FBI did under my leadership. Well, is he proud of what Mr. McCabe did? Is he proud of what Peter Strzok did? He should be asked that question. Are you proud of the relationship that the FBI developed with Fusion GPS, which was funded by a political organization in order to disrupt a political election in this country? I mean, is he really proud of all those things that the FBI did that not only are viewed by most of us as a mistake, but that led to the dismissal of people at the FBI?
Well, I mean, you should point out that somebody getting fired in Washington, D.C. is very rare. So the fact that Andrew McCabe was fired, Peter Strzok was fired, not only just fired, but Andrew McCabe has been referred for criminal prosecution by the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. Those are actually very big developments. The question is now how Christopher Wray decides to bring other people in to ensure that their political biases are not getting into their work. It's a huge deal. But I do want to say, just based on the way that Washington, D.C. works, usually you screw up and move up. This time, a lot of people have been fired as a result, which is one step towards accountability for their actions.
I feel better. Okay. All eyes on the Federal Reserve today as the president wants the central bank to stop hiking interest rates. The Fed has a big decision to make. What will it be? And what it means politically for the economy and maybe more importantly, your wallet. Plus, the hits keep on coming for Facebook, the new privacy scandal rocking the social media giant that could be the worst one yet. Just how safe is your info? Not at all. And whether companies like Facebook need to be reined in.
Congress is going to have to regulate them and stop this, and I hate to do it, but by God I will if they can't clean up their act.
New serious questions about Facebook after a bombshell report in the New York Times saying that the social media giant gave tech companies much more access to personal data than previously disclosed, including allowing companies like Netflix and Spotify to read users' private messages. The Times also reporting, quote, for years, Facebook gave some of the world's largest tech companies more intrusive access to users' personal data than it has disclosed, effectively exempting those business partners from its usual privacy rules, according to internal records and interviews, end quote. While admitting it allowed other big tech companies to take a peek, Facebook is denying it did so without consent. Facebook says, quote, to be clear, none of these partnerships or features gave companies access to information without people's permission, nor did they violate our 2012 settlement with the FTC, end quote. This just the latest privacy scandal for Facebook. And lawmakers like Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, who always speaks his mind, want it to stop.
Well, the hits just keep on coming. Mr. Zuckerberg told us that he was going to stop doing this, and now we find out yet again that Facebook has sold our private messages to other companies for bucket loads of money. Now, the first time, it can be a mistake. The second time, it's a choice. And, you know, I don't want to have to regulate Facebook, but doggone it, they've got to stop doing this.
Bucket loads of cash. So if the first time is a mistake, second time is the next. I mean, when is it a crime?
The FTC already put out a consent decree that this information seems to contradict. They said we're not going to give out unconsented data harvesting. That's kind of a horrible phrase.
Can I ask you another way?
Harvesting. But the New York Times, by the way, has been getting a talk about a bucket load of really good information about what Facebook has been doing behind the scenes, and you got to read that stuff.
Well, yeah, they have all the internal back and forth. So
who's their source?
So are these prosecutors at a federal level who'd be looking into this? Because if you lie to them, we've been told that's a crime.
Well, the FTC is a federal organization, and I don't know what kind of powers they would have, how they could actually punish Facebook for this stuff. But
consumers can punish them.
We still don't know all the details. We mentioned Netflix and Spotify as doing the data harvesting. It was also the Royal Bank of Canada. What the heck are they doing with our private information? The Royal Bank of Canada, I don't want my private information circulating with all the financial organizations. You know, if it's in one bank, it gets into hundreds of others.
So, Kennedy, we often have conversations with you because you are an expert on liberty. How does this step over the line?
Well, it steps over the line if these major companies who they donate millions and millions of dollars to political campaigns essentially turn on their rivals, and whoever donates the most money gets to help write the law. I mean, that's how cronyism works, whether it's with public unions or big tech, and they work in concert with government.
Is Facebook in danger of going down that with these behaviors?
Facebook is in danger because some of its biggest rivals will make sure that they do bring them down a peg. And tech is always going to be 5 steps ahead of the government. So even when you sit in front of congressional committees and they admonish you and tell you to get the heck off their lawn, they still have, and what they did was they buried all of this information in pages and pages of their privacy disclosures. And so the assumption is that, well, of course you read the privacy agreement.
You're talking about that long thing with the box at the end that we scroll through and we go, yes.
Read
I agree.
But the Times is saying this goes actually beyond that, that they're actually violating those agreements that nobody reads.
And they're saying that they haven't. They're relying on people's rational ignorance, but I think in this case, it's not going to shield them.
I want to ask you about the rivalries before we get too far along from what Kennedy said. I mean, isn't that the market taking care of itself?
It is. I mean, but the thing that really bugged me about this one is if you look deep into the article, and by the way, David and I talk a lot about this, the New York Times is all over Facebook, and who is their source? Because the information is really deep in there.
It's not a source that likes Sandberg.
No,
right?
it's somebody who's trying to get rid of management there, and it may be somebody on the board, who knows. But if you look at what they did, so they allowed partner companies like Spotify to access users' private messages, read your private messages, what you're saying to your mother, to your kids, whatever it is, let them read those messages after users had signed into Facebook, and they let those companies harvest that data in order to sell you stuff. So listen to, hey, Mom, I told you to watch, Mom, I told you should watch this show, and then all of a sudden you get an ad for that show. And they're too cute by half, because their defense was, we told you we wouldn't sell that information, and they didn't. They traded it to people like Spotify in order to, and Zuckerberg was the one who okayed a lot of these deals personally.
Are we surprised by that,
he wanted
based
to trade
on what
it?
we know he did as a teenager?
I think they're
those text messages
kind of dirty liars, the people that run that company, and that I've deleted my Facebook page, and I think other people should.
By the way,
too.
so did Walt Mossberg, who's a tech guru for the Wall Street Journal, used to be with the Wall Street Journal. He announced publicly this week that he pulled out of Facebook, and
the traffic is way down
on
some of the pages anyway, because people just are not trusting to put up as many pictures.
Even the Russians know that.
But I do want to hit this, because we can't pretend like we didn't see this coming with Mark Zuckerberg, because we have text messages that were preserved where he and his young, and it might not have been a teenager, but he was very young, when they were going back and forth saying what they could do and how excited they were that they had people's personal data. So if you glimpse it even that far back, you're right. Kennedy, not only are we 5 steps behind with our government, but apparently with our government lawmakers as well. Because some of those questions didn't get asked.
Look,
Katie?
I have a really hard time getting worked up about this. Facebook is a free service. If you're going to be complaining about your private data that you're giving away for free,
Why are you putting it on there?
there's no such thing as a free lunch. You are using a private service that is a private company, despite how big it is, and you are voluntarily using it to communicate with other people. And I understand that you may assume that your communications are private, but you're using a service, and the way that you pay for that service, because nothing is free, is by them harvesting your data. Now, there is a problem with them lying about what they're doing, right? They say that, they told you that they were doing this, and then there are text messages
taking
that
your
prove,
contacts. It's not just your data.
Yeah, but those contacts are also
and
on
knowing
these
what
platforms.
you're talking
and
about.
So I just have a hard time thinking that in the free market will, I think, comply and say, I don't want to be on Facebook anymore because of the things that you're doing. But nobody is forcing people to use Facebook. And
So
if you don't want them don't want them giving away your data, then maybe don't use Facebook for free.
How can anybody think that they have 5,000 people as friends and that data is secure?
That's
I have 5 friends and I tell someone
anything.
Exactly.
At least one of them is going to say, well, I know they said it was a secret, but... And then but I would just say this about Spotify, and I wasn't kidding about the planning a wedding because I read about this. So they're a music, distributor. Yeah. So do you get the free music if they got to read about your wedding or your event that you're planning? Yeah. I mean, I'm serious. If Facebook is giving them entree into your life, is that so you can get a gift? Because that certainly changes the context of the conversation.
But Spotify is
I have not
also
seen that anything is free.
You do pay for it.
Sometimes there's a subscription service. There's also free Pandora. There's free Spotify. I mean, there's all these free services that you're using, and you're voluntarily giving away your information.
Data is valuable. Don't give it away.
It is, but it's also a generational thing in that younger people don't believe in this thing called privacy. They think it's a myth.
Well,
but sounds like Facebook is like getting into that territory that my relatives call face slap.
Oh.
Like, yeah. I mean, seriously, they're taking stuff.
They're walking up to the creepy line.
It's all right. Let's move on with our metaphors. That's why Kennedy's my friend. She understands. The clock is ticking for lawmakers to reach a deal to avoid a partial government shutdown. Senate Republicans are introducing a short-term spending fix today, as it looks like President Trump is backing off the demand for $5 billion for the wall system, at least for now. Whether he will sign this new deal and what the wall fight will look like in 2019.
It's just a shame that the Democrats now have boiled down immigration reform, which is a very complex and important issue, to the wall.
Fox News alert. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell this morning introducing a short-term spending bill that would keep the government funded until early February. This as a deadline looms for lawmakers to reach a spending deal to avoid a partial government shutdown. The White House no longer demanding $5 billion from Congress for a border wall, as President Trump tweets that the military will build the wall. Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer blasting the president and the White House for suggesting funds already allocated could be used for the wall. Listen.
For the past several weeks, the president's insistence on $5 billion for a wall has been the biggest obstacle to keeping the government open. Let me be very clear. The administration cannot reprogram funds appropriated by Congress for the full wall without our assent.
But earlier today, White House counselor Kellyanne Conway pushing back on reports that the president is backing down on border security. Watch this.
Congress is going to put before him a short-term CR that goes through the February 8th, keeps the government up and running. But that doesn't mean the president is backing down from a central promise, not a campaign promise, a promise as President of the United States and our commander-in-chief to keep us safe.
And President Trump today tweeting, quote, "In our country, so much money has been poured down the drain for so many years." Isn't that the truth? But when it comes to border security, the military and the Democrats fight to the death. We won on the military, which is being completely rebuilt. One way or the other, we will win on the wall. Katie, riddle me this one. Yeah. So I love to negotiate. I mean, I will go out and haggle with the guy in the corner over a hot dog, and I don't even like hot dogs. If I was a Democrat, Democrat, I could not resist the opportunity to go to the president who so desperately wants this money for the wall and say, guess what I want in return? And I would demand something really painful that I really want. Why are Democrats passing up on that delicious opportunity?
First of all, they're out of time. So again, here we are in Washington, D.C., up against a deadline, this big, scary, looming partial government shutdown or full government shutdown, whatever you want to, doom and gloom want to say. But you're right. I mean, this would be an opportunity for them, and maybe they'll do this in the next Congress with Nancy Pelosi being in charge. But when it comes to the wall, it's all political. And when it comes to politics, it is more important to Democrats to keep a win from President Trump, because 2020 is coming. They want to take away anything he is capable of delivering on for his next campaign in order to stop him in 2020 and get what they want. They're banking on, the American people being on their side, because they're saying we have a mandate now because we won the midterm elections. And so you're right. They could take this opportunity, but they're out of time, and they're more interested politically in making sure President Trump's going to win.
I want to get out my Wonder Woman lasso of truth and force everyone in the conversation to be intellectually honest that we are not actually talking about a wall.
Yeah.
I mean, we never have been. We're talking about a fence. It could be double-sided. I mean, Chuck Schumer has voted for the fence before. The president has called it a wall, and it's not a wall.
I've heard you say this, and I agree with you up to a point. The wall is a very specific thing for the president's base. For the president's base, the wall, with those words, the wall, means a lot. This is one of the read my lips moment for this president. If he is viewed by his base as caving on the issue, no matter how they try to spin it at the White House, already some of the base is beginning to fray a little bit and worrying that the president is giving up on this. On the other hand, the president's point in that tweet is an absolutely legitimate point. I mean, it's a couple of $1 billion in a budget of $3.5 trillion. I mean, it's just absurd.
It's 1/10 of 1%.
It's even, I think it's even less. I did my own calculation, 0.06%.
Oh,
but at any rate, and yet here we have, while the president is talking about waste of money, U.S. pledges $10.6 billion in aid for Central America and southern Mexico in order to keep people from immigrating to the north. I can tell you, because I covered that region for a long time, that money, a lot of that money is just going to be wasted. Talk about throwing money down the drain.
Yeah.
That's where all the money ends up in the hands of the rich people down in Central American countries, doesn't go to the poor people who this money is supposed to support. So meanwhile, they're haggling over about 1/10 of the amount of money that's going to be spent on a program that's not going to work.
Okay, here's my problem, though. If that's 0.06%, and we're talking about billions of dollars, we are doing something wrong in this country. We are spending too much money. There are too many redundancies, and we're spending it all in the wrong places. But also, to Chuck Schumer's point, which, he doesn't always have a lot of correct points, but that's not the way the government works. You can't just take $1 billion from this program and $1 billion over here and then put it toward your pet project. If this were the Obama administration and President Obama had done that with Solyndra and taken money from the defense budget for a solar panel company, we would all be up in arms. It's really not okay. It's not how the government should function. And if the president wasn't able to get this funding when he had both chambers, it just goes to show what a politically toxic issue this is. And there are plenty of people in this country, especially people where Katie's from, on these border states, and they certainly agree with that view of immigration. But, at this point, it's almost like a healthcare level failure.
Actually, in Arizona, I would say that no, that's not true. Also, having lived near the border and still do for part of the year.
People don't want border security in Arizona and Texas?
They want border security, but it doesn't look the way that we often talk about it. I mean, because of our border down by Nogales,
where there's
Katie,
a fence, by the way.
There is hard fence. There is a wall, if you will, but not throughout it. We understand that certain parts of it have to be porous because of the topography and also just the logistics. I mean, you've got the cartel that's so vicious on that border. They're flying planes over. I mean, you need technology. You need more than this. And so I think part of the misnomer with all this, too, is that from the very beginning, and the marketing was strong with the words, the wall, but the president all along said what he meant was a border wall system. And so there are a lot of similarities, and I've heard you say this too. There are some common ground where Republicans and Democrats could get together. But let's not even think of it that way. Let's think of just the headlines today that they need to work on. Caravans coming to the country, children who were caught up in this in horrible ways, and the look that that gives us in a moral sense. And should we be responsible for that? Well, you know what, we are, because we're a beacon of light.
Yeah. But you can't discount that the president and the White House and the Trump campaign made the wall the biggest part of their promises. Yes, border security in general, which they kind of dropped wall from their language over the past couple of days after the president vowed in the Oval Office to shut the government down over the wall.
From the words
they promoted all those photos in San Diego of the wall prototypes. President Trump went and visited them. They published all those photos. I mean, the wall is a central part of what they've been arguing, and the technology and extra resources and the president sending the military, those are the things that have come second. But the number one thing has been the wall. So I don't think you can discount the fact that they're not getting it now, and based on the fact that House Democrats are taking over, they're probably not going to get it in the future either.
It's not going to change what's happening, though, as people enter this country illegally.
Right. Yep. And the law has to change for that.
Amen.
It's been being hailed as a big bipartisan victory for President Trump, the criminal justice bill that swept through the Senate by a huge margin. And whether this points to more bipartisan cooperation in the months ahead, and if it gives the president some political capital heading into the new year.
Victory for President Trump and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner, as the Senate last night approved a criminal justice reform bill. Kushner worked the halls of Congress for months in an effort to forge a bipartisan compromise. And the final vote, 87-12, with every Democrat voting yes. The measure would give judges more discretion when sentencing some drug offenders, and it would boost prisoner rehabilitation efforts. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, praising its passage.
It's a big win for the president. It's really a big win for those who have paid their debt to society and are ready for reentry. And this is about workforce development, about education, skills training, and the ability to get a second chance through the First Step Act. And the president and Jared Kushner, my colleague here, and many others in the House and Senate came forward after decades of dawdling over this issue, of coming together and passing this.
The 12 no votes were all from Republicans who argue the bill is too soft on criminals. The president tweeted this. He's looking forward to signing it and after the House and Senate sync up their respective bills. David, you had critics of this, 12, and Senator Graham did not vote. So we don't know which way he would have fallen. Are you surprised that there would have been Republicans who didn't get on to something that was so bipartisan?
Well, yeah, and again, getting victimless criminals, criminals who are accused of victimless crimes out of jail, I think is a great thing. Second chances. This is the country of second chances. That's one of the beautiful things. But look at the names of some of the, I mean, there were only 12, but John Kennedy, who we just spoke highly of, John Kyle, Lisa Murkowski, Marco Rubio. I mean, these are not extreme right-wingers, and yet they had problems because they spoke to criminal justice people who said, look, there are going to be some bad apples that get out on the street. The overwhelming majority of people who will benefit from this deserve to benefit from this. But is it worth getting some bad apples? I think in the end, the answer is yes. And I think if I was the senator voting, I probably would have voted along with the majority. But you got to listen to these people because they're serious people who have spoken to law enforcement.
So I would say this. Senators Tom Cotton of Arkansas and John Kennedy of Louisiana, who we were just talking about, came up with some amendments that they wanted to see passed. One was requiring the victims to be notified when a prisoner is given early release. They couldn't come to agreement on that. That seemed pretty basic stuff.
That's a great point.
And so maybe some of this fell down, too, because some of those 12 people didn't get what they thought were pretty basic. Katie?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at a functioning piece of legislation and how Washington, D.C. should operate, this was a perfect example of that. There are still people who voted against it who have very serious concerns about some of the implications that the bill might bring. But as we saw in bipartisan fashion, the overall benefits of the bill, they think are worth maybe some of the risks in the amendments that didn't pass. I find it interesting that Jared Kushner worked on Capitol Hill behind the scenes. He's not someone who runs out to the cameras. Ivanka's done the same thing in a lot of her work. They keep their work very private. They're interested in getting results. They are able to do it here on a bipartisan basis, which is very rare. It was debated fully on the floor in the Senate. It was given a number of opportunities to be amended. The House then passed it through and the president signed it.
What's the lesson in that?
The lesson is that you have to work quietly, patiently and negotiate.
Do politicians
behind closed
usually
door.
do that?
No, but that's Jared Kushner's the one who pushed it through, and not as a politician, as someone who can work with both sides in a quiet fashion, who's not interested in getting all of the credit and the glory and all of the camera time. That is how you get it done. So I think we'll have to see if the bill actually produces the results that they claim it will, and we'll see the implications of it over the next 10, 20 years. But watching the process is an interesting one, and it can be studied in a way that is beneficial to people understanding how it works.
That is a point that Kennedy made a while ago when we were talking about this originally, and I think it's the most interesting part of this, is that are we looking at a new future of coalition politics as opposed to party? And is the way that you actually get something done, rather than trying to do Republican, Democrat, because we've seen that's not working any longer, is if you're President Trump, do you look around and say, what coalition can I build around this one issue?
Isn't that what CEOs do?
Well, I mean, CEOs try to
it.
make money, so that's supposed to be their focus for their shareholders.
It's also more parliamentarian. It's like like they do with the parliament.
I think there can be an American implementation of a system like that, but I do think it's really important that we ask these fundamental questions that civil libertarians have been asking for a long time, which is, why are we so hard on certain people? Why are we painting criminality with such a broad brush that is so incredibly unfair, particularly to communities of color? And we have seen the data, and we have seen the disparity, and we want to make sure that people can participate in this economy by working and thriving and providing for their families. And it gives everyone in every community a much greater advantage. I think it is a first step, but I think this is a fantastic place to start philosophically and legislatively.
Does it start to undo some of the criminal legislation that Bill Clinton put into place? I'll talk about that with my guest next hour, Pastor Scott, who is a big proponent, Daryl Scott, of getting this passed. We'll move on. We are awaiting Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's decision on interest rates, set to take place just a few hours from now. Market watchers fear another hike could slow down a strong economy, and the president is weighing in on it all. So, what is the president saying, and how would another hike in the rate impact the economy? We'll talk about it. Stay close. Victory for President Trump and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner, as the Senate last night approved a criminal justice reform bill. Kushner worked the halls of Congress for months in an effort to forge a bipartisan compromise. And the final vote, 87-12, with every Democrat voting yes. The measure would give judges more discretion when sentencing some drug offenders, and it would boost prisoner rehabilitation efforts. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, praising its passage.
It's a big win for the president. It's really a big win for those who have paid their debt to society and are ready for reentry. And this is about workforce development, about education, skills training, and the ability to get a second chance through the First Step Act. And the president and Jared Kushner, my colleague here, and many others in the House and Senate came forward after decades of dawdling over this issue, of coming together and passing this.
The 12 no votes were all from Republicans who argued the bill is too soft on criminals. The president tweeted this. He's looking forward to signing it and after the House and Senate sync up their respective bills. David, you had critics of this, 12, and Senator Graham did not vote. So we don't know which way he would have fallen. Are you surprised that there would have been Republicans who didn't get on to something that was so bipartisan?
Well, yeah, and again, getting victimless criminals, criminals who are accused of victimless crimes out of jail, I think is a great thing. Second chances. This is the country of second chances. That's one of the beautiful things. But look at the names of some of the, I mean, there were only 12, but John Kennedy, who we just spoke highly of, John Kyle, Lisa Murkowski, Marco Rubio. I mean, these are not extreme right-wingers, and yet they had problems because they spoke to criminal justice people who said, look, there are going to be some bad apples that get out on the street. The overwhelming majority of people who will benefit from this deserve to benefit from this. But is it worth getting some bad apples? I think in the end, the answer is yes. And I think if I was the senator voting, I probably would have voted along with the majority. But you got to listen to these people because they're serious people who have spoken to law enforcement.
So I would say this. Senators Tom Cotton of Arkansas Arkansas and John Kennedy of Louisiana, who we were just talking about, came up with some amendments that they wanted to see passed. One was requiring the victims to be notified when a prisoner is given early release. They couldn't come to agreement on that. That seems pretty basic stuff.
That's a great point.
And so maybe some of this fell down too because some of those 12 people didn't get what they thought were pretty basic. Katie?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at a functioning piece of legislation and how Washington, D.C. should operate, this was a perfect example of that. There are still people who voted against it who have very serious concerns about some of the implications that the bill might bring. But as we saw in bipartisan fashion, the overall benefits of the bill, they think are worth maybe some of the risks in the amendments that didn't pass. I find it interesting that Jared Kushner worked on Capitol Hill behind the scenes. He's not someone who runs out to the cameras. Ivanka's done the same thing in a lot of her work. They keep their work very private. They're interested in getting results. They are able to do it here on a bipartisan basis, which is very rare. It was debated fully on the floor in the Senate. It was given a number of opportunities to be amended. The House then passed it through and the president signed it.
What's the lesson in that?
The lesson is that you have to work quietly, patiently, and negotiate.
Do politicians usually do that?
No, but that Jared Kushner is the one who pushed it through, not as a politician, as someone who can work with both sides in a quiet fashion, who's not interested in getting all of the credit and the glory and all of the camera time. That is how you get it done. So I think we'll have to see if the bill actually produces the results that they claim it will, and we'll see the implications of it over the next 10, 20 years. But watching the process is an interesting one, and it can be studied in a way that is beneficial to people understanding how it works.
That is a point that Kennedy made a while ago when we were talking about this originally, and I think it's the most interesting part of this, is that are we looking at a new future of coalition politics as opposed to party? And is the way that you actually get something done, rather than trying to do Republican, Democrat, because we've seen that's not working any longer, is if you're President Trump, do you look around and say, what coalition can I build around this one issue?
Isn't that what CEOs do?
Well, I mean, CEOs try to
a...
make money, so that's supposed to be their focus for their shareholders.
And
it's also more parliamentarian. It's like like they do with the parliament.
I think there can be an American implementation of a system like that. But I do think it's really important that we ask these fundamental questions.